Welcome again. Welcome to Saturday morning, the Auckland Ecumenical Lay Preachers gathering. As far as I know, it's a first by Zoom, purely and simply because the best speaker we could find on this topic refused to come from New Plymouth to Auckland to talk to us. Hi, Michael. And thank you, Michael, for agreeing to be our speaker, and thank you for conscripting Sataga to be your co-speaker. I'm going to start with a devotion and then some quick notices, and then we will head off and see what you've got to teach us, Michael, for which we are thankful until the next service that we do, if at least, maybe eternally. Today we gather to explore the theme of intergenerational worship, and so the obvious choice for a devotional text is Matthew, where people brought their children to Jesus and he blessed them. But when the disciples tried to turn them away, Jesus responded with compassion, saying, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Arguably one of the top 10 most well-known verses in the Bible. At first glance, this moment might seem to be simply about Jesus' love for children. But when we think about it in the context of intergenerational worship, there's something more profound here. Jesus doesn't just say that the kingdom of heaven belongs to children alone. He shows us that the qualities we often associate with children, openness, humility, and a trusting heart, are also what we should cultivate in our worship, no matter what our age. In the context of worship, we are reminded that all generations have a place at the table. Whether young or old, we each bring something unique to the worship experience. Children bring their innocence, their pure joy, and their unfiltered faith. Older generations bring wisdom, experience, and deep understanding. When these generations come together, we create a fuller picture of the kingdom of heaven, a community of believers who embrace one another, regardless of age, and who worship together as one body. Jesus' words are an invitation to us all, whether we are children, youth, or adults, to come as we are and to engage in worship. In doing so, we reflect the diversity and unity of the church, where everyone is valued and everyone has something to contribute. As we consider the role of each generation in worship, we are reminded that our worship is richer when we come together, just as the children came to Jesus with their hearts open to his blessing. In our intergenerational worship, we are called to share in that same openness, learning from one another, serving alongside one another, and growing together in our faith. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for the example of love and acceptance that Jesus shows to all people, regardless of age. Help us to embrace the wisdom and the joy that each generation brings to our worship. May we learn from each other, serve each other, and worship you together as one family. We lift up Michael and Sotaka to you today. Bless them in their journey of faith and service, guiding them with your wisdom and grace as they walk alongside others in this community. May their hearts be open to all that you have for them, and may they be a light to those they encounter and to us. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, thank you. I'm not going to try and sing a hymn over Zoom. We have experienced how that doesn't work before. Welcome, Rowan. I'm glad you sorted out your technical difficulties. You were stuck in the waiting room for a long time. Anyway, I only have one notice, and that is that we are doing this again, though probably not by Zoom, on March the 29th, where the speaker will be Emily Colgan, talking about biblical interpretation relating to climate justice or climate change, climate something. And she will be well worth listening to. I have managed to hear her by video a number of times and had some private conversations with her, and I am looking forward to hopefully actually managing to actually get in the same room as her for a change. So it's already on the event listing on the new NZLPA website. So if you want to put it in your calendars, there's a button on that you can click and it will put it in your calendar. And I heartily recommend you do that. We don't have a lot of details about what Emily will talk about, but they will get added in due course when we extract that information. So Reverend Michael Lemanu is going to lead us in shaping the worship for something or other. I've only written that or said that so many hundreds of times in the last, I don't know how long, and I can't remember what it is when it comes to saying it now. But Michael, over to you.
Thanks, Pete. Muriora kia kate katoa, nau mai hara mai ki hui hui mai nei. Ka mihi ate te kai karakia mo te kā ki te tuku ngā whakawhitai. Ka nui te mihi ki a koe, Peter. Thank you for leading us this morning in our devotions and prayers. And thank you for the invitation to be here with you this morning. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa. Morning, everyone. It's great to see you all virtually in this space. And thank you for, firstly, for being so accommodating. I am a recovering Aucklander, having now moved to the beautiful Taranaki with my brother, Sotanga, who will talk a little bit about himself in a second. And so the opportunity to be able to be here this morning and to share with you and to learn from one another is a blessing and a privilege. And thank you for giving up time on your Saturday morning to be here. Very, very much appreciated. And hopefully it'll be fruitful and productive. Ko Michael Lemanu tōku ingoa. My name is Michael Lemanu. I know most of you here in this room. I'm a minister stationed to the Long Island Synod, working in Taranaki as the Taranaki Regional Ministry Enabler. I work across 9 different churches in Taranaki, and which encompasses Samoan, Fijian, Te Tā Māori, English-speaking, as well as CV Union parishes. And we work collaboratively in a new ministry model in our region, and one in which is heavily reliant on the empowerment and the resourcing of lay people and lay worship leaders, such as many of you here in this space. So this is a particularly important opportunity for people to come together to discuss and to journey together in lay ministry and in lay preaching. I have 3 beautiful children who have just left, which is why it's nice and quiet in my house. My wife's taken my kids to somewhere. I have a 6-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old, so life is full at the moment. And my lovely wife, Isita, we've been married since 2017. And we were really enjoying this new challenge and chapter in ministry. Prior to being ordained in ministry as presbyter, I worked at Mission Resourcing for many years as the Te Wiwi Children, Young People and Family Ministries coordinator. And so a lot of the conversations and things that we'll talk about this morning are kind of require me to put on a hat I haven't worn for a while. So which is nice. I'm looking forward to that. And so I'm really excited and yeah, hopeful that we'll have a great talanoa and kōrero this morning here in this space. I haven't come by myself. I brought my brother with me. He's a lot smarter. He's a lot better looking than me. And he'll challenge you a lot more, I think, as well than I will. So I'll hand it over to him, Sultanga, to introduce yourself, and then we'll get into what we're going to be doing this morning. Thanks, brother.
Yeah. Manuia, everyone. Uh, Thank you, Michael. Now I know that it was you that roped me into this. No, it's an honor and a privilege to be among you all. It's good to see some familiar faces, and it's good to see some new faces too. My name is Sultanga Misikei. Probably not as busy as Michael with the kids. At the moment, it's just me and my wife and our dog. We live here in Taranaki. I was born and bred here in Taranaki. My wife is from Samoa, but she resided in Auckland. So whenever I introduce myself, I like to say that I'm a good fisherman. I casted all the way from Taranaki to Auckland and got a good one in. So half Samoan. So residing from the villages of Whareapuna and also from Manonotai, Isaalua. And yeah, so as I was saying earlier, I am a ministry student. I'm placed in one of the 9 churches that Michael um, works with in North Taranaki, and I am going to be going to Masterton in the new year, and also getting ready to take on a new Lower North Island Synod role as the leadership development person for 20 plus. So as some of you might know me, I am a student at Trinity College. I am one of the youngest, well, I was told I was one of the youngest ever student reps for Trinity College. So I've been an advocate, I think, for young people's voice for a while I've been in my time in theological training. I've also done my own local work here as a youth leader for the Samoans for a very long time. I think I started when I was in 3rd form, for those of you who are young enough to remember forms. Yeah, all the way until after my 21st birthday. So been doing it for a while on a local level. But it's great to be here and I wouldn't say I'm smarter than Michael. Michael's pretty smart. He just downplays it. So he's probably the more challenging one. It's good that we're kind of a tag team here in Taranaki. We just bounce off each other and hope that the best comes out of that for the people, especially in terms of what he touched on, our lay people. We're heavily dependent with obviously 9 churches. We don't have 9 presbyters. We depend on the work of lay preachers to really carry out the ministry, but it's also a part of our job to empower them to do that appropriately and in the most meaningful ways and authentic ways that they can. So yeah, it's an honor and a privilege to be here with you guys, and hopefully we can share some wisdom. But I think more importantly, hopefully we can talanoa, conversate. What me and Michael have to offer is really dependent on your feedback responses to what we have prepared. So don't be shy when it comes to those times. Question us, conversate with us, and we can use this virtual space as almost our kava ceremony, where we can drink and talk and be our authentic selves as Indigenous people and as lay preachers of the church. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, bro. Yeah, so as Tanga said, this session will be done in a talanoa or kōrero conversational style. And where we are not, let me speak on behalf of Tanga briefly to say we are not the holders of wisdom and knowledge relating to intergenerational ministry. We depend on each other and the wisdom of the people in this room to be able to help and to journey together as we discuss these topics. And so how much hopefully we'll get out of this is how much you're willing to put in. It'll be a reciprocal experience and exchange. And so please, at any time, Tang and I have both been through Trinity College at different times. And one of our lecturers, he loves to be interrupted. So please, at any time, if you have a thought, a question, please feel free to intervene and to ask, or to, if you need clarification, if you disagree, that would be great, so that we can hear different perspectives and understandings. And even if you just want to put the comments in the chat, we'll keep an eye on those as well as we go along.
And
so yeah, this is a loaded topic, and one that Sultang and I we've gone back and forth We were talking for hours about this yesterday, trying to refine and make what we're talking about a little bit more concise. And admittedly, we didn't get to any point of success. Well, in my view, we didn't get to a point where we said, yes, that's what intergenerational worship and ministry looks like. But that being said, when we're talking about intergenerationalism, it's not a simple and straightforward concept. And it's well suited to the context in which we're talking about. When we talk about worship and ministry, which church is not straightforward and it's not simple. There are a lot of complexities, and this is one of those aspects that we must consider in our preparations and in our ability to practice ministry within our context. And so in this session, we will attempt to discuss and bring forth helpful conversation, or talanoa, you'll hear us say many times, providing a safe relational space to discuss and even, as I said, to disagree with each other. We'll speak predominantly from our own experience. So please be mindful that your experience is your experience and mine is mine. And if there's a disconnect from that, that's totally fine, because we only speak from our own lens. And that will be part of helping us as worship leaders in sharing and opening up our own depth of understanding and experience. So your own cultural experience, your contextual experience, your vocation, and your experience in ministry, please bring all of those into this conversation, and we know that it will be helpful. And then as we go on, we'll talanoa, we'll continue with our session, and hopefully we'll land to a place which will be good for us to take back to our context. So we will follow a format. It's a very simple format. We'll have two sessions today, two kind of blocks, which will be centered around an activity, a question, and conversation. And then we'll have a little break, as much of a break as you can have on Zoom. And then we'll have a second session, which will be done in the same formula. That being said, like our people as people of the Moana navigated the waves across the Pacific over generations, we'll also ebb and flow with the conversation. And we're less interested, as I've said, in offering concrete solutions that are incapable of being molded to your context, but rather we're more interested in offering something that can be freely shaped and flow where it must and need to go, while still holding your identity and your selfhood of what that looks like for you as a worship leader and for your faith community. So let's get into it. Let me just put this up on the screen. Good old Zoom. I haven't shared this on screen on Zoom in a while. We're going to start. I'm on the last slide instead of the first slide. We're going to start with a very simple activity. It will require you to do a little bit of thinking, so we'll give a bit of space and time for you to think about it. And then we'll go around and invite people to share. So this is what we would like you to think about. Think of something that, three things. Firstly, something that was prominent or popular when you were young, but is no longer. Secondly, something that was prominent when you were young and is still prominent. By the way, young is a very subjective term, I know, so if you can interpret that as you will. And thirdly, something that is prominent now, but didn't exist when you were young. Does that make sense? So something that was prominent when you were young, but is no longer. Something that was prominent when you were young and still is prominent, and something that is prominent now, but didn't exist when you were a younger person. Do you have anything off the bat, Tanga, to kick us off, or you need some time to think as well?
Just give me like 2 minutes. I'm just trying to think of one more answer, and then we'll...
Okay, that's good, because I prepared, and I had my three.
When you were young, still.
I can see a hand up.
It can exist.
The church.
No, it doesn't have to be related to the church. It can be if you want it to be, but it doesn't have to
Think
be.
of something.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example for mine, which are not church related examples, but you may have church related examples for yourself. So something that was prominent when I was younger but is no longer. I'm sure many of you in this room will remember these shops called Blockbuster, Video Easy, United Video. These were places that we used to go in the weekends, and I can still see in my mind, you know, the going to get a video or a game that I wanted, and it's got the sorry I've been hired, and then being disappointed video. That's something that if I talk to my kids about, like my kids don't even know what a CD is. And so that's something that was prominent growing up in the 90s as a 90s baby. That's a no longer thing. Something that was prominent when I was young, but still is. I was right at the edge of the birth of Facebook. And we used to have something, so Tanga will know what I'm saying, called Bebo before Facebook, which was kind of like MySpace for young people. So right around this boom period was when everyone used to say at school, "Oh, are you on Bebo or are you on Facebook? What's that? I don't even know what that is." Now it's very uncommon for people to not be able to connect with other people
Facebook.
virtually and in the social media space. And something that is prominent now but didn't exist when I was younger. I was thinking about podcasting, and someone will correct me to say, no, podcasts have been around for a long time. I know radio, you can say radio is a long form of podcasting. But in terms of how we consume and attain information today, every person in the whole world has a podcast, it seems like, to share a perspective or an opinion. So that's something today that's very prominent, that when I was in school, we didn't have any of that kind of accessibility to that kind of information. So those are three things for me. A video stores were prominent when I was young. They don't exist anymore. Well, I think I've read recently there was like one Blockbuster left, I think somewhere in the South Island I had read. Social media started when I was younger and is still around and is bigger than it's ever been today. And something that podcasting wasn't prominent, didn't exist in my time, or in my context at least, but is now very popular. So I'm gonna stop sharing so we can see each other. Tanga.
Yeah.
And then we'll invite others if they have to share any of their thoughts.
Thanks for the feedback with the Blockbuster, and just so you know, you just missed out. Taranaki, I think, was probably the last place to have a rental place. It only closed last year. Video Easy just closed last year.
That's very disappointing.
That lasted longer than it should have, to be honest. So the thing, first question. Michael, maybe if you could just leave the questions up so we can revert back to them. But the thing that I thought was prominent back when we were younger, that's probably not now, as most of you remember, as Michael said, we're early 90s babies. But one thing that I remember that was really, really prominent, and everyone had one, and if you had one, you were really cool, was those cassette Walkmans. You know, the ones that played the tapes. Yeah, I don't know how much money I spent on AA batteries for those things, but those were really prominent growing up. And I remember I used to think I was really cool because I was able to change the colors of my Walkman. That's why I always remember it. Something that I think still prominent from when I was young and still is now is our country's love for the sport of rugby league and rugby. It's something, I don't know, that might be the hardest thing to squash here in New Zealand, maybe, is that love and that passion for the sport. It's something that I've been involved in for quite a long time, and so for me it's something that was prominent then, and it's still flourishing now. And something that's prominent now that didn't exist when we were young, whatever that means by young, is virtual spaces like this. Zoom meetings. Like I feel like I have more virtual meetings than I have face-to-face meetings these days, and it's forever growing. And we're able to see the capacity of these programs now. Sharing screens, we see each other face-to-face. You can be off camera, on camera, mute, unmute. It's a whole different thing now. Back from the days when we were still dialing the phone with that circular dial, and you had to ring your friends like that on Saturday nights or Friday evenings. It's been a big shift. So for me, those are my three answers for that.
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, people would be freaked out to hear that phones had a cord attached to a wall. Once upon a time. Anyone else? Let's open up for sharing. You don't have to answer all three. Maybe there might just be one that you want to that sticks out. Please, feel free to unmute yourself and answer when you'd like to.
Well, I'll set the
I'll
ball
go.
rolling.
Oops.
The dial phone thing, one phone in the house, often located in the kitchen or hallway, and it was for everybody. Now, I worked in telephone exchanges, and they also had a unique sound on the phone line that went and we were always told growing up that that was birds jumping on the telephone lines. As I had telecom days, post office days, I now know that's the sound of a selector in the local step-by-step telephone exchange that needed cleaning. Prominent when you were young and still is. Oddly enough, I'm going to say board games. Much to my surprise, my children would gather on the back patio and play board games with their friends. And when my son comes up to visit, him and his old school mates, they still get out on the back patio on the table and play board games such as Uno, Cluedo, and the like. What is prominent now that didn't exist when I was young? The internet. The internet came into being in 1998. And so that makes it younger than two of my kids. So there you go.
Thank you.
I was going to talk about movement. Something that was prominent when I was young, but I can't do anymore, is cycling. Something was prominent when I was young and still is walking. And something that is prominent now but didn't exist when I was young is a painful hip. Thank you.
That's a good one. Thank you so much.
That's a good one, yes. Something that was prominent when I was young was, because I love food, is that we're always making the umu, making food on Sundays, preparing it fresh from the garden, etc. But that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, well, in Auckland, you can't just get into the backyard and make a umu. Was prominent when I was young and still is the church going on Sundays. You have to get around going to church on Sundays. But I guess relating to that is that in Samoa and Tonga, you don't work on Sundays, right? But it's changed now. What's prominent now is that people work on Sundays. You've got to make a living. You've got to pay the bills. You've got to be da-da-da-da. So people say to other people, why aren't you coming to church? And I said, don't beat those people because they got to feed their families. I mean, church doesn't just exist in the building, going to church. You've got to have an understanding that we're not all on the same playing field, and some people have to work 3 jobs. So that changes in life is really, for me, is really, it's all those things changing, and fast foods and packaged foods, etc. Thank you.
Hello, thank you.
Yeah, if we want to go back to the telephones, while it probably wasn't prominent, I actually still remember party line telephones, where yes, the operator essentially manually rang the phone in a pseudo Morse code fashion, and depending on the pattern of rings, you knew whether it was for you or not. And yes, telephones, I think, is probably a great example that you could actually chart the changes over one person's lifetime just at the moment. The other thing that was prominent when I was young, but is no longer, at least to the same extent, is temperance societies. If you remember what they are, organisations promoting the abstinence from alcohol. I think that's all I will offer you at the moment.
Thanks, Peter. I can see some comments in the chat from Liza. Visiting family and friends whenever and whatever time of day. McDonald's. Yes, McDonald's may outlive us all, those golden arches. If it does, and kill us in the process, but that's another thing for another day. And social media, yep, absolutely. And then Angela, gutter ball. Oh wow, that's a throwback. And riding bikes, Twinkies and netball culture. And number 3, TikTok. Yes, very much so. Thanks, guys. Anyone else want to share?
I'll share.
Thank you.
Okay. Afternoon Sunday school when I was growing up in the UK.
Yeah.
TV was prominent when I was young and still is. I remember when I was 11 watching Churchill's funeral. What's prominent now? Not being able to see a doctor and having to talk to a doctor online all the time, which I don't think helps whatsoever. That's it.
Thanks, Linda. That's a good one. Side note, yesterday my son was supposed to see the doctor at 11 o'clock, and I rang the doctor to say, can we move to 11:30? And they said, fully booked, sorry, have to reschedule. I said, okay. They said, the next available appointment is January the 6th. So yes, I resonate with what you're saying there. The healthcare system. That's another topic to add to the list, Peter. I think for future topics we can talk about in this forum. Anyone else like to share?
Can I add this? I think it's relevant to the topic, Michael. But I'm talking about smoking. I was a smoker, used to be smoking, but I'm doing the rolling thing. Back the days for cigarette. So I'm no longer a smoker, no longer smoke these days. But well, there are vapes coming in, take over. Vapes coming in, take over there. So I can say smoking still exists, but in a different form and in a different way of doing it. So hopefully that helps. Thank you.
Thanks, George. That's a good one. I see Simon or Evangeline commented. Landlines, yep. Bob Marley. Still prominent. Yeah, very much so. And virtual spaces. Yeah, that's great. Do you want to add anything to that? Van, I can see you've unmuted.
Yes, no. Hi, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity. Everybody talked about landlines, and I think that is, although my granddaughter, I found an old phone for her that she dials, which is quite cool. She actually will know now how a phone looked. And music, I think, will always stay with us in whatever form. And obviously, what is very prominent now is all the virtual platforms that you can imagine, good or bad, but they are there. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Something that was prominent when I was young, but I don't think is any longer, is late night shopping. So we didn't have Saturday, Sunday trading. So as young people, we would go into town, into the malls on a Thursday night or a Friday night and hang out. So that was our big social event. Something that was prominent when I was young, still is vinyl records. They've made a comeback. And something that's prominent now but didn't exist when I was young is obviously the internet. I remember I was working at World Vision when the World Wide Web became a thing, and we having instructions about what it was and big explanations. So yeah, it seems crazy now.
That's great, thank you. Yeah, especially with Christmas time coming up. I remember when the mall was open till midnight for Christmas shopping, that was such a big deal. But now I think like me and my wife just do all of our Christmas shopping online and don't even bother to go to so true.
Yeah, it's people like your wife that get me a job as being Santa to try and attract them back into the mall.
Maybe there needs to be a virtual version of that. I don't know how you would
probably is.
Virtual reality or something. Thanks everyone for your comment. That was great. There was some great throwbacks there. It's lovely to hear. How often do we ask these questions about our understanding of worship? How often do we look at things that were done when we were younger and look at whether they're still done now, things that were not done when we were younger that are very popular now? How do we examine and look across generations and across time periods at the ways in which worship informs or reflects who we are as church and as people in an attempt to follow and embody the gospel? How reflective, how questioning are we? Because we know for the majority of us, and Tang and I had a guess before we came into the meeting this morning that him and I would be the youngest people in this room. And if you're younger than Tanga's 32, I'm 33. And so we suspected that we'd be speaking from a different generation to most of the people in this space. And so there's things that across generations the church has continued to carry and to take with it and to hold prominence to. There's things that the church had done before that are no longer relevant, a loaded term, to the context and to where we are. And there's things that the church are doing now that it's never done before. And you would have seen, for example, some of those things as we've just gathered for conference a few weeks ago in Pornike, Wellington. And so these are kind of the conversations we'd like to, thoughts we'd like to frame in our discussion moving forward this morning. So I'll pass it over to Tanga, who's going to look at our next question, and then we're going to continue to talanoa from there.
Thanks, Michael. So yeah, the way that we've set up our sessions is that we have a small activity, and then we've got 2 questions, and we'll focus on each question throughout our session. So the question we want to pose for this first session for us to talanoa about is, what do we mean when we say intergenerational ministry? What do we mean when we say intergenerational ministry? Because it was something that when me and Michael was conversating about, it was something that we thought was really, really broad. And it was quite hard to narrow it down or to find a lane, shall we say, to walk down in terms of opening up this topic. So we want to pose this question, and we want you to continue with this talanoa and sharing with us, maybe just to get an understanding of what those of us in this room think we mean when we say intergenerational ministry. So the floor is open. Just jump in with what's your response to this question that we're proposing for our talanoa time. What about you, George? Do you want to share what you think maybe about what we mean when we say intergenerational ministry?
Well, I can conclude what I'm going to say into 2 questions. Is the older generation are still willing to learn, and as the younger generation are happy to reflect? Those 2 questions, I'm wrapping up my answer for what do we mean when we say intergeneration ministry. Why I'm throwing that question is because there are some factors outside church that making the church and us church communities and faith compete with our family, with our people that surrounding us, which they see what we do in our ministry, they say, nah, that's boring. So they move on to that one. From the younger generation perspective, they're learning a lot through internet. They have more opportunity at school, which the older generation didn't have that opportunity. And as we know, the older generation, like I can say, I'm not trying to pointing down any age here, but I can say those that are in 70s and 80s, they only access for newspaper. They are more isolated in the retirement village. The many they are still at home. They're not access to what's happening around the world these days, like the younger generation. So our ministry should have to motivate the older generation to be open to learn from what our youngest one understand and achieve, and also to still maintain the younger generation to respect and listen and keep open room for the experience from our oldest one. I'll leave it there for now. I'll continue on if there's anything else. Thank you, Sotan. Michael.
Thanks, George. Thanks for that. That was a really good point to share. Does anybody want to rebuttal or respond to what George has brought forward to the table?
I'm not sure. Sorry.
I think what I was wrote down while so far on this is that the intergenerational ministry needs to be a significant communication for all ages. It's an opportunity to have some spontaneity in the church service, and perhaps also if you're an older person doing the service, a reflection of what it was like when you were young, and see if there's a change in what's going on for the younger generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth.
If I can add, for me, I think intergenerational ministry means that you have a service or a place that is inclusive to all. A respectful place where people can actually come together and worship how they, what they are used to, or how they used to worship, or what is comfortable for them, the way they worship. But it also should be a place, I almost want to say, where your worship is challenged, because how I used to worship when I was 10 or 12 is really different how my granddaughter will worship when she's 10 or 12, or how our 10 and 12-year-olds worship today. So it should be a place of inclusivity, a place where we can all be and be respected. I would say that is intergenerational ministry. Thanks.
Thank you. There's something in the chat here from Angela, which she says that we can learn from each other, younger generations and the older generation, respect for one another, and be open and mindful of each other's learning and pace of life. To understand each other and ministry needs to be relevant for all ages. Agree, yes, include everyone, and to do everything in love. So that was from our chat box. For those of you who don't know how to access the chat, that was in our chat.
And thank you.
Really jump in.
Yeah, I think we had to unpack what intergenerational and ministry is for our congregations, for our communities, because if because we all have different perspectives of what that means in our heads. We have our own worlds in our heads and live in those little worlds. So I feel that we need to together as a congregation or together as a network to have an understanding firstly of what that means. and how that what that looks like, and then the action behind those things. What are we going to do then about that to ensure that we create the environment and the relationships and the mahi and the kaupapa behind it, so that we can all work towards it. And so it's not just then say this is what it looks like and we still continue to do what we're used to. And so that we had to have those relationships and have that talanoa within our own churches, and to make it work, so that we ensure that our churches are open to intergenerational ministry, and we have the commitment to bounce off each other. If I'm going off a tangent into my old ways of doing things, the younger generation can respectfully and nicely and kindly say to me, hey, Judy, you're going back to what you're used to doing. So we got to have those checks and balances, and those respectful and meaningful relationships and commitment once we know what that means. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Christy. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, I came to lay preaching through teaching Sunday school, and we used to always take our Sunday school children out of the service and take them to a noisy activity and such like separately. I question the wisdom of doing that now. I'm wondering if admittedly, I'm dealing with quite a small congregation and we don't regularly have children present now. But I question whether we should be actually building our services around children being present and actively involved. When I've done this, I've found that some of the older people actually quite like the activities the children are doing. So, I think we've all learned that you don't drop family time from the service, because that's a big, big mistake. But there is a place for actually keeping the children in the church with their parents, with their grandparents,
with their
and people they aren't related to. I don't know what others' thoughts on that are, but that's a conclusion I have come to. That, if you can give the children something else to do during the boring bits, it's still better to actually have them in the room. And if the older people want to do a colouring sheet as well, let them.
100%.
Yeah, that's very close to my definition of intergenerational worship, perhaps, rather than intergenerational ministry. I think I want to go to a more formal definition, I would say it's the practice of intentionally developing a pattern of regular worship where the expectation is that all ages will be in the same service together, and find at least some part that resonates directly to the stage they are at.
Thanks, Peter. Linda, you've got your hand raised. You're on mute, Linda.
Sorry, old school. I think the key word there is ministry. And so it's the generations ministering to one another. And so for that to be possible, like Kirsty said, the kids or youth need to be involved. So intergenerational ministry is not just what happens on Sunday, but it's ministry involving all of the generations together, using individual skills and talents that God has given them, even at a young age.
Sorry, we'll go over to Linda Hall. She's got her hand raised. And then I'll jump back into the comments, into our chat box to see what's been going off in there. So Linda Hall, over to you.
Unmute, Linda.
It's like in reinventing the wheel for me. We used to have what's called family services once a month, which I think we're going, yeah, I think that's a positive thing, which is aimed at the children that the adults will remember better. Children need Sunday school. How are they going to learn Bible stories and such like weekly if they don't have Sunday school at specific ages? So you have a small group of younger children, a middle group and an older group, relevant to their needs in the world outside. Language is quite a barrier in any service. So we have to be very careful with our use of language, simple language all the time, not just for children. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Just coming into our chat box here. Liza has put in inclusiveness, patience, and respect to our elders and children. Sounds like a dream, but hard for some or us to let go. And also another comment there, ministry could be inward looking and outward. Is there anybody else who would like to jump in and share here? Michael?
Well, it's a real great wisdom that everyone shared so far in the room. Thank you so much. I think for me, there's a few things. I think intergenerational ministry, one of the words that comes to mind for me is compromise. There has to be an allowing of space made for the other, which requires of us to give something up in order for that space to be made. And like Linda, you made an interesting comment about family services, or some churches we do missy church, for example. It's interesting to me that a lot of our churches today don't have the approach every Sunday is a family service or every Sunday is aimed for all people. We've siloed somewhat in terms of how we look at and how we take time and attention to young people or to other generations across the breadth of the church. Same thing that Kirsty was mentioning about Sunday school and taking children out. I think a lot of that comes from the necessity and the scarcity of time. And so, it's like, for example, in our Pacifica cultures, kids will have Sunday school before church or after, as someone had mentioned before, and they're in church in the service. And nowadays, the reality of the world today, time is very limited. Well, the time that people are willing to give is very limited. And so trying to do everything in the bubble of a service whilst kids getting Sunday school lessons, there's the compromise. There's things that have to be given up. And the question for us as worship leaders and as people who work in ministry is, how much of that are we willing to give up? How much are we willing to compromise? How much are we willing to make space for? And what do we do when we've gone too far in one direction or the other? So even as it relates to, as someone mentioned about inclusivity and space, and to me that comes back again to space. And we look at how a young person or a child would articulate and understand God, and how their grandparent or their parents would understand God. How do we validate and how do we give authenticity to those expressions and say, yes, how you see God as a 12-year-old and how I see God as a 33-year-old are both very valid and authentic expressions. And then how do I encompass all of that in the context of worship? It's such a big challenge, and it's such a ongoing and loaded talanoa and conversation. But as I think Judy, you mentioned, it's something that we have to unpack in our own congregations and in our own context to figure out what that looks like, how that breathes and functions. And it's going to be different. It's going to be different in Mount Roskill to Warkworth, Mahirangi, to Mount Albert, to South Auckland, to wherever you go. What that expression of intergenerational worship looks like is going to be very, very different. So I hear a lot of really interesting thoughts in that space. But what I do like, that I think we've kind of all touched on to an extent, is the idea that we can learn and work with each other. It's not an imposition of older generations or people who hold the knowledge or the wisdom of the church telling younger or other generations or what church should look like. Intergenerational focus or approach to worship and ministry is one that encompasses the wisdom of everybody in this space, and that's regardless of their experience or their age, culture or context, etc. So those are just a few rambling thoughts from me and Sultana. I don't know if I just stirred the pot some more or refined anything, but that's your job.
That was good. Can I stir a little bit here then, Michael, I suppose, in your words, by asking you, could you share the example? Because I mean, yes, we've heard in our talanoa this what you've brought to the table, compromising and the compromises that need to be made. But can we share from a flip side? You know, we had this conversation earlier about us probably being the youngest people on the Zoom. But I want you to, could you share with us from your perspective of, you know, you were sharing with me when we were talking about this, the example from your home church in terms of, because music came up a lot in our icebreaker, that music is something that has been ever present. So could you come from that perspective, Michael, and give us your example from your church? Because I think it's really, really important for the group to hear.
Yeah, you mean about this?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So my church, I come from South Auckland Church. We have had maybe 10 to 15 different ethnic groups in one congregation. So very diverse, ethnically diverse, and theologically diverse, and in terms of what worship looks like, diverse as well. And I was sharing with Sultana when we were preparing, I had in my youth ministry one day, I was sitting with the youth during the service, because we would as well have them sit in the service and push for our church, as opposed to giving them their own space outside of the service, to actually have that space be in the service. But we sang a hymn and got up, and I noticed the young fellow I was standing next to didn't sing the hymn. He just stood there the whole time. And I said to him after the service, "Why don't you sing the hymn?" And he said to me, "Oh, the hymn means nothing to me, but I know it means something to someone else. So I'm happy for that to be the way that it is." I said, "Oh yeah, that's cool." This was about a 15, 16-year-old at the time. Then the next week, because in our church, we try, and Evangeline can add to this, we have the compromise of contemporary and an organ in the same service. And I was standing there practicing the next Sunday with our worship team. And there was an elderly couple who used to come very early to the service, who were sitting at the back while we were practicing. And I always remember the old Komato was sitting at the back, and he was like this. And so I turned around to my friend who was playing the drums, and I said, "Play louder." But that's an example of you know, the kind of compromise and lack of compromise sometimes that we encounter, and it can be done in reverse as well, where younger people say, "I don't want a bar of any of this. This is rubbish." And our elders and our parents have been the ones that have attempted to make the space. So yeah, these are the kind of dynamics and the things that we grapple with in our context, and whether we get them right or not it's almost irrelevant. But the point is that we're trying to figure out and journey with our people to, as Judy said, to get the checks and balances of what this looks like for us in our own context. So that's a little bit of a story of an experience. There's many more I could share, but I won't.
Can I just add something there?
Absolutely.
Michael made me laugh now. But you know, one of the things we really miss out, and I think one of the things I'm always aware of, having kids that has gone through different churches when Simon was studying, and at different places, you know, as you know, all of you guys who've done ministry training, we're here and then everywhere for 1 year. But one of the things I think we sometimes miss is asking the kids, asking the youth, you know, just let them just speak. Ask, what do you want in a morning service? What would you like to add? What would you like to take away? It's just simply asking and listening to their voices, you know, because I think sometimes we think we know what's good. And that's for all ages, not just, I'm not saying kids as a Sunday school teacher, but I think it's for all ages. What would you like to see in a service? And we did ask this question here at Walkwood once, and one of the ladies, beautiful soul, said, you know what? One Sunday I would actually just like to get up and come to church in my pajamas. And I mean, why not? Why not? So the simply just asking. I think we need to do that a little bit more. Just ask.
Thank you for that. I think that's really, really important. And I think it's important that when we ask those questions of our young people, of our rangatahi, that we do listen and not just hear. Because a lot of the times we can sit there and say, yeah, we can do that, but we don't put any praxis to that action. So it's really about intentionally listening and saying, well, okay, why not? Why not take a risk? Like was said, if it means coming to church in pajamas, let's have a pajama service if that's the risk that we're thinking to take. So in saying this, in terms of our talanoa and around this question, we've seen the varsity already of what this terminology means, intergenerational ministry. And it's been huge. We've covered a lot of ground just in what's been shared already, and there's been a lot of wisdom here. But I also, in saying that, like Michael said, the stirring of the pot guy, there's also some things that I think are missing in our understanding of what we mean when we say intergenerational ministry. In terms of my own response to this question, I was telling Michael when we were preparing for this, I was thinking of, what about if it's not just an age thing when we say intergenerational? What if it's not just the elderly and our rangatahi, our young people? What about if it's on the level, like a level of understanding? And this is my example of this. Whereas I remember when I first came into placement as a ministry student, I did my sermon, thought I had a really great service, thought I had a really great sermon, preached a really good message. And then I was talking to one of the guys at a cup of tea afterwards, and he said, I didn't get it, but I understood more your children's talk. And that's a lot of the time, that's a lot of the cases we get when we're preparing sermons. That the people that we're actually trying to conversate with, that we're trying to inspire and uplift, there is a range of the level of understanding. So I think that also plays into this this word intergenerational ministry. But I know that we all need a break and we probably all need a cup of tea, but I just wanted to summarize this part of our session here by saying and posing to you all, what if the answer is we don't know? We've had some great conversations. We've had some great talanoa. We've had some great spaces, but like I said, there's still some missing spots before we can say, oh, that's intergenerational ministry. is it okay to say at this point that we don't know? And I think it is. I think that's fine. I think the main point is that we're on this journey now that lets us begin to walk. Is it okay, though, if we don't know, to then say we might have some ideas of what it's not? When I'm saying that, I'm meaning when me and Michael were preparing for this, the first thing we wanted to say was that we're hoping that the idea here is that the intergenerational ministry, it's not a solidified answer to, the issue that we have of the decline of young people in the churches. It's really not. There's some more things that we have to work on in terms of dealing with that issue. Another thing that I wanted to bring up was, I knew for certain that we've got a ministry student co-facilitating with a now ordained minister. So I was like, I bet you this group is going to expect us to go to the Bible, Michael. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the Bible and have a look and really take this on board. So even though we have to see that even the Bible's understanding of this is contradicting. So let's have a look. The scripture I'm bringing up to you now is from Titus chapter 2, verses 1 to 8. And it reads, "You, however, must teach what is appropriate to sound doctrine. Teach the older men to be temperate, worthy of respect, self-controlled, and sound in faith, in love and in endurance. Likewise, teach the older women to be relevant in the way they live, not to be slanderers or addicted to much wine, but to teach what is good. Then they can urge the younger women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled and pure, to be busy at home, to be kind, and to be subject to their husbands, so that no one will malign the word of God. Similarly, encourage the young men to be self-controlled, and everything set them an example by doing what is good. In your teaching, show integrity, seriousness, and soundness of speech that cannot be condemned, so that those who oppose you may be ashamed, because they have nothing bad to say about this." So Titus, a letter in the New Testament, but it's contradicting because Titus comes straight after Timothy. But remember what Paul told Timothy? Don't let anyone talk down to you because you are young. But then we have this model that's a very top-down model. We see there that it says, teach the elderly men, teach the elderly women, so that they can then go on and teach the next generation. But what's contradicting about what's been said in this text is already what we've been talking about in this Talanoa session, in this part of our session, that, hang on, where's the space for this to not be a one-way road? And let the young people teach us something. Let the young people take the lead. Let the young people be the example. That way that we have a bottom-up model when it comes to intergenerational ministry. That it's not so much that because we have elders in our congregations, that wisdom is therefore gatekept or safeguarded by them, that what they think should flow through down to the next generation is what flows through. Why can't something flow up into the from a younger generation into the elderly generation? And like Michael said earlier, compromise. If we take this text, is there room for compromise to be had? Or can we make compromise? When we have packed out churches, especially in a cultural context, cultural synod context, the church is full. Who moves down the aisle for someone else to fit in? It's the young person who slowly gets shifted to the outcasts or outcasted to the back simply for not understanding. But we have an opportunity here when we're talking with intergenerational ministry to say, why can't we just open up and squash together on the pew, to work together, to sit together? I was able to hear something over our last synod meeting when we were meeting in Ashurst, the Lower North Island Synod. And someone brought up this comment that made this comment. If you can sit and eat together and talk together, then you can work together. So I think while we're talking about intergenerational ministry, we also need to be intergenerational in the practices that we have, not just within the service. We need to be able to, as was brought up earlier too, build those relationships that are not just on Sunday morning 10 a.m. or whenever the service is. It's that point of being our relationship that between our generations is so fluid and fluent that we're really friends. And friends means friends when we're gathering on Sunday across generations. And that, I think for me, is not the answer. It's definitely not an answer to what do we mean by intergenerational ministry. But I think what it is a very good starting point. If we can build those relationships, have those conversations, ask what's missing, what needs to be included, taken out of services for there to be that inclusive factor for all. Maybe it is that sometimes we are sitting there with our hands on our ears, and it goes vice versa. It does go vice versa. It's not just the elderly who sit in there, it's our young people too, our rangatahi who sit there with their hands over their ears. And I can say that from my own perspective, because there was a time in my faith where I walked away from the church because I was sick of singing these hymns that's not relatable to me at all. When I was, my biggest fear coming into ministry was having to pick this back up with one voice and trying to look through hymns that would be speaking to me on a deeper level. But it took time. And it's that level of understanding again. It was when I felt my faith was a little bit matured, these words started to mean something a little bit different. And I think that's the whole point of intergenerational ministry, is that it's not something boxed. It's just like this telenor that we're having. It comes in, it goes out, it comes in, it goes out. It has to be fluid, continuously fluid. Not so it's relatable just for young people, not that it's just relatable and interesting for rangatahi, and so it's not boring, but it's also got to be inclusive of, okay, what's going to be inspiring, uplifting, what's going to instigate some deep thought about the messages we're bringing through. And then it's on us as not only presbyters, but also those of us who are lay preachers. Instigating that thought is the really important part, and it has to be authentic. Like Michael was saying earlier, it's the authenticity that gets everyone interested in what you're talking about. And that can also be intergenerational. Language, it was already brought up earlier as well, the language that we're using. If you're preaching and you see someone there, or you've got prayers going on with all this big, beautiful and wonderful language, I guarantee you there's a young person there, or there's across the age groups, there's someone sitting there saying, I have no idea what that means. So are we really breaking it down? And I remember growing up, I used to always read those, there was a series of books, was it like Dummies 101? So whenever I'm preparing a sermon, that's what's going through my head. Dummies 101, Dummies 101. Because like me and Michael, we've been trained in the theological college, and the academic standard of Trinity College is high. But just because that's high, that doesn't transfer down into the grassroots level. We could use all the theological language we wanted to, but it would never touch anyone, because we'd be trying to be walking dictionaries or thesauruses, trying to explain what certain theological terms means. But so I think for us at this point, this has been a really great opening session. And I think at this point, Michael, do you think this is an appropriate time that we might take a break so everyone can get a cup of tea and come back? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sounds good, bro. Yep. No, I know when you're preaching, when I was in the pews, you looking at me like I'm a dummy. That's good too. Thanks for that. No, that's really good, bro. I think that's a really good place for us to sit. And is that okay, Peter? We just have a quick virtual break. Be able to come back and talk about what we are actually calling. we're going to continue on into our next session and see where we go. And we're going to start with another activity. This will require us to do some writing or thinking at least. So what we're going to do, I'll put it up on the screen, is we will I'm going to put up 6 different images on the screen. And as the images come up, and these are just photos that Tang and I have just taken either from our own experience of things or just random things. And I want you to note for yourself, what about the following images are intergenerational? You could also say nothing about the images intergenerational, as long as you can argue why. And have a look at all the things that are happening in these images and pick out these things. So we'll go through the 6 of them, and then we'll come back to each image and we'll invite people to share based on each of those images once we've looked at all of them. Cool. So here's the first one. What about the following images are intergenerational? First image. Second image. Third. Fourth. Fifth. And final. And then I'll go backwards, and then once we get back to the first one, then we'll start talking. So this was the 6th one, the 5th, fourth, third, second, and first. Okay. So having a look, what about these images from what you can observe intergenerational? Let's have a look at the first one. Any thoughts? Feel free to whakaaro mai, kōrero mai, or your thoughts or your ideas. Do you want to tell us where this photo is taken, Tanga, or the context of it?
Yeah, so this photo was taken in Sydney. I'm at a theological college in Sydney at the beginning of this year when I went to present my paper at the Talanoa conference. We've got something in the comments there, Michael, that reads, it's intercultural plus intergenerational. Some young people at the back. president-elect, presidents at the back.
Yeah.
In this photo.
Any other thoughts? What's intergenerational? Intercultural, that's a good term. That's another loaded term as well.
Yeah. But I mean, it's all tarred with the same brush, the interfaith, intergenerational, intercultural.
Yep.
But yeah, that was the key bit that stood out to me, the fact that that we had possibly a person of a different race than we are used to as a feature in the photo, and before you explained where the photo was, Sutonga, I was actually thinking that it could be read as a street person or homeless person who had come into a church service as well, which is yet another take on the same story.
Mm.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Peter. And this is my good friend that I met over there. We've remained good friends. He's actually coming.
Yeah, I think I know who it is once you explain the context. But yeah,
Billy from he's from Kanaki. He's very, very, very cool. I think for me, it's this image is what I'm seeing is intergenerational, because it's not only intergenerational but also multicultural, but it's the appreciation of that these two people are just there appreciating each other's stories and being real relaxed about it. It's not something tense. It's something that stories can just be shared, and we can just tell our stories regardless of the generational barrier, regardless of status. So for me, that was why I was thinking about this image. Please continue to share what others think.
Yep. The first immediate thing that stood out to me was the colors of the beards.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got a way to go to catch up, Michael.
I got a bit of a grey streak here, but my lighting is favorable at the moment. But that's I was thinking about just the general. It looks like a genuine conversation where both people are quite invested, and him holding the food, the concept of us breaking bread together. I feel like there's an exchange of knowledge and wisdom going in both directions. In this context. Yep. Anyone else?
Yeah, that's what I concluded was the sharing of korero over kai.
Yep. Yep.
Good place to start.
Yep. Yep. And often, where our churches are not good at intergenerational expressions is often in our formalized communal worship space. But where you do see intergenerational interaction is in the food after the service, in the morning tea.
Oh,
and that's also where cultural intersections happen a lot of the time as well. So
yeah.
perhaps those are learnings that we can consider in our worship preparation, to look at those aspects and how they can be more fully embodied within the context of what we do from 10 to 11 or 9:30 as well. Okay, let's have a look at the second one. What's going on here, Tanga?
This is from when we were in Napier for Synod, and we were asked to do that program. So for the young people that were attending Synod. So we have our superintendent there coming down and working along, doing some activities with some of the young people that were present there at Synod with us.
It was, the people are mimicking the person who's working with the other people, and I don't consider them particularly young, are mimicking the posture of the people, which is a way of communication that is very useful in terms of getting on with what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, thank you for that, Ruth.
This is
For
what
me,
I call
oh, sorry, George, you go.
This is what this image is. Oh, thank you very much for providing the images, boys. But this image is highlighted to me. For me personally, this is what I call intergeneration, and this is the ministry I can describe as an intergeneration ministry. For how I look at it, there are 4 different generations I can see in there, and also I can describe that as intercultural or diverse, even though they only have 4 is on the picture, but it can explain diversity in there. The lesson that I see in that picture is partnership, nurturing, mentoring, and guiding on the young kids. They have the opportunity to follow and listen to the elders and listen to those that have the power or run the show or the leaders, and also the hospitality and relationship and connection. It's going to be flourished from intergenerational ministry that I saw or that I see in this picture. Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Yeah, some of the context around this picture is that because this was right at the end of our synod meeting on the Saturday, and it was the evening program that we were asked to facilitate that would incorporate the young kids of our presbyters and leaders who were there. But after the meeting, the formal meeting finished, and this happened, probably maybe 85% of the adults left Aotearoa and they didn't stay for this.
Yeah.
So when I talk about the compromise, this is an example where when it came to a space that was intentionally for younger people, a lot of the older people said, nah, I don't need to be part of that, I'm going home. And some of them had valid reasons to go home, but a lot of them just went back to their motels and continued with their night events. And so it was good that our superintendent stayed to be part of this. But that's just an example of some of the things that we've kind of been talking about and touching on this morning.
The other thing that this image speaks to me of is older people indulging in craft.
Yep.
Which is not entirely new. I mean, there are so many knitting circles and craft groups around churches, but they tend to be only for older people. Yeah.
Yep. This activity that they're doing here in this picture, the station is about equity, and the activity was for them to create a door that would open up for people to remove barriers and open doors for people. And then the next morning when we had our worship, we left the doors at the door entrance of the church, so to kind of tie those ideas together. And a lot of people who are asking, oh, what are these doors? I said, well, if you were here last night, then you might know. But there's that example again of the working of those practical things, which we think are only for kids or young people, but actually they can engage across generations as well. It's one of those things. Okay, we go to the third image. What's going on? What's going on here?
Whatever's going on, it's cold and wet.
You want to elaborate, Tana?
Yep. So this was my first conference that I ever went to in Kirikiri. And so yeah, that's right. We were going to this place, and it was literally pouring down. But it was an image that I used to describe the bicultural journey. That's at that point in time there were no barriers of, say, Tawiwi to Taha Māori, whatever culture was there. Nobody cared. They all just wanted to get dry and stay dry and warm. So they all just huddled together. And I think for me, this is the reason why I sent this photo through to you, Michael, was I think in terms of intergenerational, it's the same thing. It's a way to, how do I put this? It's a way that's intergenerational ministry that's not talking. It's not verbal. It's just hands-on. and it's for me that's my point of view on it, and that's why I had it included in. It's really there's got to be a point for discussions, absolutely, but there's times where we've just got to stand in the rain together, and we just have to know how to do that. Yeah.
Sure, bro. Other thoughts, reflections?
I wanted to say that there are actually times, you know, good or bad, where intergenerational, in the sense of age, doesn't really matter, and situations just bring us together. And so whether we want to or not, we just have to gel or be together. You know, a state where we are different. And I wanted to use a clever word, but I can't remember now what the clever word is, a scientific clever word. We're living organizations. Oh, that's my granddaughter at the back. Living living things that has very different properties actually exist together quite peacefully. And this photo here, for me, is like it symbolizes that where there's sometimes just times where we gel together, you know, and circumstances bring us there. I want to go back to that other photo because I couldn't get my mic on. The photo of the girl, of the three ladies standing, that one, yes.
Yep.
That for me actually was, and once again, I'm looking at the photos and no context. I heard you guys' context. But the girl who stands on with her hands on her hips, my question was, how involved was she in the three heads down there at the table? And are they, you know, for me, that was like, I wonder how intergenerational that conversation was. Because those three are huddled down there and there's somebody just standing. But once again, we're looking at pictures and we don't know context.
Yeah.
So that was my observation from that photo.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to mute.
Great observation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think of navigating storms together. Storms never last, that song. Stuck in rings when I look at this. Yeah, and how it's almost sometimes a necessity for us to work together. And it's an embodiment of our response to the Gospels to ensure that no one is left in the rain by themselves. So yeah, I think it's cool. Thanks, Ray. I think that was good images there.
Yeah, I recognise the image because that could be me under the red umbrella. So to me, it was about not only of welcoming, but of respect, because a lot of us don't speak Maori, but we understand enough that we stand quietly and we listen to the kōrero and respect that this is the way that the Maori do things. And it is respectful just to listen. And sometimes we can sometimes they say something in English, and sometimes we pick up the odd word. Despite the fact it's a very wet situation. That was not a fun drive from Auckland up there, I can tell you that now.
That, as you've just described it, Kirsty, is a striking parallel to me to Michael's story of his 15, 16-year-old compatriot. He's saying, yeah, I'll stand through the hymns because it's important to someone else.
It's embracing, or is it showing or demonstrate some of the Maori principles in regards to Methodist bicultural training, which is one of them is kōtahitanga, which is unity or stand together. It's the lesson that we learn from that. There's unity and stand together it's going to create more strength.
Yeah.
There'll be not agreement in many things, but because we are stand together, that picture showcase that. Not only that one, but the manakitanga, seeing the hospitality and also the care that the conference provide in Kerikeri, that's expressed a lot in that that picture. Coming into intergenerational, we hope to see more of the youngest age include in our gathering like that, which I'm pretty sure that going journey through bicultural journey, before missionaries and good news come to New Zealand. Kaumatua and Hapu and every iwi have a way or structure which is include from the youngest to the rangatahi up to the Kaumatua. And they know how to respect, how to listen to each other. That's what make them looking after each other. That's what make them unity or together. That's create them strong and agree in one view. Doesn't matter where they came from. That's my input for that. Porter, thank you.
Thanks, George. Yeah. There was an article, I think, last year where after Cyclone Gabriel, where Mike Hosking said something like, it doesn't rain differently on Maori. And I had a conversation with one of our lecturers at college, George, and I said to him, maybe it doesn't rain differently on Maori, but not everybody has an umbrella. And I think as it relates to our understanding of church and justice, this is something that can be embodied regardless of generational differences, cultural identity. This is something that we strive for and that we push for, and that must be reflected as well in those times of worship and in our responsibilities as well. All right. Thanks, guys. Let's have a look at the fourth one. I didn't pick this photo just because I happen to be the center of it, but what's going on here? This is my ordination a few weeks ago, alongside 4 of my colleagues, Reverend Juana Flade, Reverend Paul Jensen, who some of you will know, and also the Reverend Sione Tisemale, who some of you will know as well. So what's intergenerational about this picture?
Those awesome kicks, bro.
Sowing the spirit of Kaitiakitanga. That's for me.
I think for me, it's a symbol. This image is a symbol that everyone has a spot at this table and at this gathering. It's we've got images of all different generations, but regardless, they're all being respected as being on the same level. And just because obviously Michael was the youngest, and then we've got some fires, we've got Paul there, we've got our other bro, Sione Tisemale there. It wasn't the fact that Michael was a young person being ordained with some of our elderly, but it was a point of fact that they were being ordained and respected on the same level. And I think that's a really nice landscape to think of intergenerational ministry on. By the way, I did tell Michael at his ordination that he should wear his Jesus sandals, but then he came with those. I just trying to defer away from his shoes because I'm sure he's got heaps of.
The number one comment that I have received from my ordination is not about anything to do with the service. It's just to do with my shoes. That's it. And I wasn't even thinking about the shoes. I was just wearing shoes, well, because I'm the kind of person who wears things till they disintegrate, much to the ire of my wife. And I just happened to just wear these shoes. And I guess they're a symbol of intergenerational ministry for myself because they're just normal shoes to me, but to other people, they make a statement of some sort. And so, yeah, that's just been such an interesting dynamic. Also in the photo, you'll see at the end, Juana Flay, she's standing next to her grandson. And her grandson, because she has mobility issues, so she asked if her grandson could assist her at the times when we needed to stand and to do different things in the service. And so he was there and she was leaning on him throughout the service. And to me, that's the real intergenerational image. It's in the background, but to me, that's the central part of this image, is that she asked, and it was her who requested for him to stand next to her in this part of the service. And I from the top of my memory, I can't recall a time where something like, well, in recent memory anyway, where this has been done in ordination. So again, how we stand together, the spaces in which we stand, and the spaces that we allow for one another, and the statements and the symbolism that we embody as well. For ordination, we don't have to wear the AELP, the robe, if we don't want to. And me, as an anti-traditionalist, I thought about it. Oh, no, actually, I thought maybe I'll just wear my Warriors jersey, but I didn't do that. But then I thought, no, because this is a way to honor the whakapapa of our hahi and what that symbolizes, which means something to other people, maybe not so much to me. But then wearing something that symbolizes tradition was a meaningful experience for us in that space as well. Okay, this one. This was just a hat that a youth gave me one time. What's intergenerational about this, if anything?
That hat is showing the last century and this century. It's an example of compromise.
Yeah, yeah.
It's an outward display of faith.
Yep.
Okay. Pitbull commercialism.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
Reading the Bible.
Missed that. Sorry, Van. Oh.
Sorry. It's one of those Saturday. What with the Bible you are, well, you just flip that, and now you walk with the Bible on your head.
Oh yeah, gotcha. It is, and it's funny, I think about because I always laugh to myself about this, because I always think about being told off for wearing hats in church. I said, but it says Jesus on it. What's the So yeah, very much so.
I remember as a 15-year-old, somebody's son came back from university and went to church in sneakers, shorts, and a t-shirt, and I was blown away because it was outside my experience at the time. Yeah, I had to do a lot of thinking to come to terms with it.
Yep. And again, like we talked about before, what's prominent before may no longer be prominent now, or what is prominent now was never considered to be important before. And that's something that, as we look at, particularly when we look at contextualizing our theology and our faith and our traditions, the shift and the flow of those things, they may not resemble what they looked like before, but that doesn't mean they're any less authentic or genuine to those people and how they express it. And it's an ongoing thing that we grapple with in our churches and in our worship. Okay, last one. What is or isn't intergenerational about this image?
This is one of my little bugbears. That is a glorious, wonderful hymn. It's got a fantastic tune. But oh dear, those words are churchy. They actually were, I've had to translate those for children, particularly those children whose English is not their first language. And that takes a whole lesson to just go through those old English words. So, I mean, I do actually still use that hymn because it is very popular with the older people. But if you're wanting people to understand it, you're going to struggle.
Yeah. So what would you have translated the words to, Kirsty?
Well, that's a $64 question, isn't it?
Well, you know, thine is yours.
Yep.
Again, you know, it's thou essentially is the singular of, you know, thee, thine and thou. They're all singular forms of the plurals that we use in English.
Yeah.
You, yours. You know, hast, it's has. You know, or is over. So that's the literal translations. But you have to have actually been in church for a number of years to actually pick up on those.
Yep, very much.
Yeah, or be well versed in the King James Version. I saw the juxtaposition of the technology with traditional worship, even though the projection as a technology is starting to get fairly old hat now. It's it's a traditional 18th century hymn with 20th century technology being used to communicate it. Could be a good fit if it's part of in the context of the whole service, but it's just as the image, it's a little bit an awkward juxtaposition. To use some more big words, sorry, Kirsty, I'll translate them later. And we'll be having even more modern technology on that screen tomorrow, hopefully. Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Thanks, guys.
This photo, I think, will wrap up my my little reflection that I start with in regard to intergenerational, Michael. For me personally, I'm with Kirsty as one of my favorite hymns, and I use that all the time. I lead a service, and I translate that into Tongan version and arrange it as an anthem sound and tune with the instrumental of it using the brass instrument. So one of the or two of the women's choir, they used that in the Tongan. So, but many years ago, and it still touched me, that hymn, and that hymn message for me, that showcased what church all about is intergenerational. God sent his only son for any age, for any culture, for any generation, even the past generation, today's one, and the future one. God still be there. And the tools that help me to deliver my message when I deliver it is intergeneration as well, by using the internet, the device, and the today's technology, which can be able to reach and touch the under two, above two, primary, intermediate, high school, university, and even adults and old people. So that's it for me for that photo. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, George.
It's one of the problems with a broad perception of intergenerational worship is that what that means is that we throw out the old stuff and update it. Whereas I think that in the context of our talanoa today, it's been more that we respect that there are things that are important to some people because it is their lived experience and they have grown up with it. And so it is worth including, but you may need to do some expectation setting and explanation to other segments of the worshipping community so they understand why it has been included And equally, you need to make sure that you include things that are relevant for those segments as well.
Yeah, I actually agree with that point of view. That is one of the older hymns that I don't want to retire, but some of the words do require explanation. And it works wonderfully if you're alternating languages in the verses. Yeah, I mean, that is a firm favourite of a lot of people. It's beautifully singable.
Yep.
But yeah, the language can be a challenge. But there are ones out there that are far more difficult.
Yep. Yeah, this is obviously a Resurrection Sunday hymn normally, is where you'll see it be sung. And it does all the things that that everyone's spoken about is kind of the idea of, but it also extends to our liturgy, the prayers that we speak, the translations of things that we choose to use, and sometimes the medium in which we portray those things doesn't matter if the language hasn't been properly addressed or explained. And so these are ongoing things. And so this is from my church in Papatoetoe, where Peter will be tomorrow, an example of that. And I was sharing to Sultanga that because in our church we have tried over the years to compromise, as I've said many times now, but sometimes when you compromise, you feel like you just end up with both sides not feeling satisfied to what they're looking for. And I look at this sometimes as just an example of that being funny, because some of our elder members would look at that and go, oh, well, we're using a PowerPoint and it's on a laptop. That's quite young and trendy. And say, yes, but also the language is from the 18th century and it's being played on a pipe organ. So there's that kind of juxtaposition, to use Peter's terminology, that's ongoing. These are things, but again, why we're doing these activities is that these are often things in our preparation and in our planning of worship that we take for granted, or we don't always take the intentional time to actually consider. Why do we sing these words? Why do we do it this way? What does this imagery or symbolism actually mean? And are these still images and ideas and theologies that we want to embody and communicate to our people and as we worship and as we gather together? So you might have images in your own context that might be really helpful for you to kind of reflect on as you're preparing for services and for worship, and looking at intergenerational ministry in your context as well. So, Tanga, do you want to add anything before we move on?
No, I'm good, thank you for that.
So, here's then the question that we're landing at. And this is our question that's hopefully we're gonna end up somewhere from these points of discussions to bring everything together. Like I said, we're ebbing and we're flowing with where our talanoa takes us. Does intergenerational ministry matter? We're asking that as a real question. Does intergenerational ministry matter? And as a side to that, how is this reflected in lay ministry? Specifically, can be for you, or maybe how you've experienced it for yourself. And this would be a really great time to share with one another some of the things that we do in our own context that might be under the umbrella of what we would call intergenerational ministry, or we may be able to challenge one another on what those things are. So does intergenerational ministry matter? Hopefully, because you're still here, you might have a particular answer to that question. But then how is this reflected in lay ministry and in your practice of lay ministry? Let's have a conversation about that, and then we'll wrap as we come to an end of our time together this morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Hey, sorry guys. I just thought I'd just jump right in there. We just came out of an ordination for one of the students in Trini, so I've been dying to say something, man. That's why we've been typing away, keyboard warriors, so in the background. But there was some thoughts that came to my mind. I thought I'd just share it. It might be off topic, but hey, it's all good, right? Safe space.
Yep.
But what comes to mind in regards to like intergenerational, we've obviously talked about the generations, but I also think culture, to understand different cultures, because I found in some ministries, because there's this limitation of understanding of someone's culture, why they do something, it makes everyone like, not really like work together, and then they kind of like, refuse to listen. But the other thing is too is disabilities, like people or children or who have different, who can't sit for a long time, or who can't or loud noises and things like that. I honestly believe that in some places they do not think about that, and then they have this expectation a child's got to sit or an adult's got to do this. So I think these are some of the things that are part of intergenerational. We start to learn about the different cultures in our own ministry, the different disabilities, the different things that people might be blind, all these things deaf, to really incorporate. If we understand our people in our church, in our community, then we can cater. And this is what I said earlier about relevance. I'm still learning. Me and Liza have come into lay preaching. We're very new, so we're waiting to graduate. So I can't officially say that we are officially like everyone else on here, an accredited lay preacher. But the skills that we've had, and we thank God for these different skills we've had in our own lives and other ministries that we've come from, that actually helped us shape us as a lay preacher. And I personally, I may be going into my 50s. I'm just going to say that out loud now. Don't remember it, guys, but my heart is young. It's young in heart in regards to the young people, what they do. And I agree, the elderly or older or whatever generation you wanna name it, do not like certain things and how they do things. So I think it's really important that if we can find that balance, because not everyone's going to agree, and that's okay, but find that balance where we can come together to understand, first of all, the basic necessities in our own churches and our own one. We're trying to find that balance too, because people seem to, and my sister mentioned this earlier about letting go. People can't let go, man. Come on. But, we have to work with the grace of God. It's very hard, but I know we can do it. But, yeah, I wanted to just get that off my chest. Thank you so much, guys. Awesome. I could go on all day, all night. Trust me. Talanoa. But, obviously what comes after is action. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for this platform. Malo lava sotanga, and also Michael. But I feel whatever the age is physically, it doesn't matter. My heart spiritually inside is as young as it can possibly be till I pass. But anyway, that's me. Thank you, guys. Malo lava.
Thanks, Angela. Thank you very much. You raised some good points, and I want to come back to what you're saying about cultural understandings and abilities. And this is very important. Again, when we're intentional in our efforts to consider to be intergenerational, we also become intentional in our efforts to be intercultural, to be inclusive. So there is a link. You can't do one thing in isolation to these other important aspects. And these are often forgotten. And I can say this as someone who's worked in the church for a long time now. These are often forgotten and neglected aspects of worship and ministry that our leadership fails to consider. I was at a church when I was training with my placement in Manurewa. Peter will know. And one of the things that was dumped in my lap was rebuild the youth ministry. I was like, okay. The first youth program, I asked one of the boys to read the Bible, and I didn't know he couldn't read. And after I asked him, why didn't you read? He's, oh, I can't read. I said, oh, I'm so sorry, bro. I should have asked you before if I could. And so then the challenge for me became, okay, every week I'm going to have to find a different way to tell the story of the text we're talking about without reading the text at all, so that that person can understand. But it's in the context of worship. These are often things we don't think about. We don't think, oh, there may be someone who doesn't, English is their second or third language, or they may not be able to, when we say little things, when we say things like, would you please stand, and someone can't stand. Those are little aspects of our inclusivity and that are incorporated and come together when intergenerational becomes a focus of the work that we do. So thank you for your talanosis and your input and your dedication from your car. You must be stuck in Auckland traffic, but we've already talked about that. We won't go back to that. But thank you very much. Other thoughts and whakaro? I see in the chat from Neville. Greetings. Oh, greetings to the people of HCUC. Thank you for joining us, Neville. That yes, it does matter, and that we in Hutt City Uniting Churches are very aware of this matter. That's the starting point. So thank you very much for that. And then Linda said, yes, intergenerational ministry is important for the same reason that Paul expresses here, i.e. everyone has a part to play in the ministry of the church. And then quotes, now if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts of the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. And that reminds me of the hymn from Colin Gibson. We are many, we are one. This whole idea of our ability. And the problem is that we often want everybody to be an ear or an eye, instead of affirming and giving authenticity to whatever body part they represent as part of the body of the church. And it's the intergenerational young people that often are left out in that conversation. Peter, you've added as well? Yeah. You've done work with the Auckland Christian ministry. That is saddening to realize.
And it's actually worse than what I wrote. There's an extent to which they're not even able to take help from people that are outside the deaf community, which I found really disappointing. But like the other side of that is, whose fault is that? Is it their fault for that, or is it our fault for having an atmosphere where that's what they learn is to expect?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Michael, if we could go back to what Neville had put in the chat from HCUC, and then ask Neville. Obviously, there's a sense of awareness there. So what are you guys doing to reflect that in lay ministry there in HCUC? If you could share some examples or some ideas, that'd be great.
Oh, yes.
Can I come on and talk now?
You can, Neville. Yes.
Well, it's Lynn actually.
Oh, Lynn, sorry.
Yes. No, we are very aware of that, and also the fact that our youth now have taken over a lot of our intergenerational ministry. And tonight at Nainai College, we're having a big get together. There'll probably be about 200-300 there, just from our parish. We are having also more and more youth running the evening services, and that is very much interdenominational. And some of the hymns that the young ones sing, the older people find very difficult because they find it a bit hard. But I agree that a lot of our old hymns, the words are not suitable for our young people today. But we are very aware of this joining together, and it seems to be working. The people are coming, young ones and old ones. Excellent.
That's great. Thank you so much. I think as well as when we talk about language and hymns, because I'm sure we've all heard this term that the young people's music is Sunday school theology, or it's, and I always say to them, I could go through with one voice and I could shred heaps of hymns that have terrible theology, not all of them, but a lot of them. And so what it highlights though is, again, why do we sing this song, this hymn? What does it mean? What does it embody? Who is it speaking to? These are questions that often when we're in, especially in preparing for worship and ministry, we just think, oh, I need 3 hymns or I need a prayer liturgy. I pick this one that I like, I pick that one, without really taking the time to properly understand the language, the theology, the meaning, because these are important aspects. And these are little ways that we exclude generations or people from outside of our own common understanding sometimes in our worship that we have to be mindful of. Kirsty said, not all disabilities are visible. Yep, very much so. Dyslexia is surprisingly common, as are audio processing disorders, poor hearing, and poor vision. ADHD is not limited to the young. Very much so. Any other reflections on the question? Oh, and Judy said, yeah, Ari's second part of the question, into not well reflected. Yeah, and I think that's a common experience, Judy, that many of us, we know that it's important, that it should matter, but it's the how, and that's how it's reflected. That's the part that we're struggling with. Tonga, do you want to bring our conversation kind of drawing together, share about your experience in North Taranaki with some of the lay preachers and people that you worked with that might help us to kind of tie everything together from our conversation? Thank you everyone so far for your thoughts and your talano. It's been so great.
Yeah, 100%. So yes, I'm placed in North Taranaki, and I came from Sinoti Samoa, the Samoan Synod. And then so this was my first experience to come into an English-speaking context church. I was blessed enough to have a number of characters, shall we say, in my journey during placement. One of those was a retired presbyter, and she was really, really helpful at the time. She nitpicked me a lot, but it was really, really good. It was what I needed to further grow and develop. And I remember this one service that I was like, oh, I think I've got it. I think I've got it really well done. And I thought I nailed everything. And then she came up to me afterwards and said, "You've done well, but you didn't do your job as a presbyter to double check the health and safety standards of the church. There was a door in front, there was a chair sitting in front of the fire exit door." So she always had something to go at me about. But in terms of my experience with lay preachers, we've got one lay preacher here his commitment in terms of his preparation is second to none when it comes to being a lay preacher. This guy he literally use a whole 3 months to prepare for a service. And there was one month when I first arrived, in my first Easter with them, that we were preaching consecutively. So I was one Sunday, and then it was him, and then it was back to me again. And so I preached this message on Good Friday, that I was saying, when Jesus passed away, or when he comes back, when he's resurrected, if it was me as a young person, I would want the whole shebang. I wouldn't be waiting for or looking for Jesus in the garden. I would want the whole shebang if I was Jesus being resurrected. I would want the fireworks. I would want the lights. I would want the clouds split apart and everything. And I'd preached this on the Sunday, and he was the next week, and he said, "Do you mind if I preach something that's going to totally contradict what you just preached?" And I was just like, oh, a little bit thrown off, but at the same time I was just like, yeah, absolutely. Because I wanted him to really to really pull it apart, because it also helps me as a ministry student, but we should be working like that. So anyway, he done this service, and he talked about the beauty of Jesus just being a gardener at the tomb when they find him, and the beauty and the subtlety of it. So after he finished his sermon, I sat there and I was like, oh, he just rocked me. He rocked me like I preached the week before. But then I sat down with him and said, look, I've got next Sunday. How about we work together on this service? And this service, we're not going to have any type of sermon. What we're going to have is we're just going to have a debate. And we're going to talk this through about, not really a debate, but just a conversation about, the two different perspectives we've taken on this. And it was a really, really good way. He's a He's an elderly man. I found out, Michael, it was his 86th birthday on Wednesday during our meeting. John's birthday. He turned 86. Yeah, but we had this conversation together during that Sunday that I think was probably one of my best Sundays on placement. I think because it wasn't anything scripted. It wasn't anything that was just we were fighting our own cases. No, it was us actually just having a conversation to level out each other, and to have these different differentiating perspectives. But in saying that, I think that was a really good way also to empower a lay person, because a lot of the time we, like, especially here in Taranaki, we are dependent on our lay ministry people. But I think it's also part of our job to make sure that you guys have the support, the resources that you need to be your most authentic self when you're up on the pulpit or when you're doing the work of lay ministry. And I think it's taking that risk and not being afraid to take that risk when you have the chance to do so. So for me, in terms of intergenerational ministry, does it matter? Yes. Is it poorly reflected? Yes. But there are avenues and ways that lay ministry can be the platform that becomes the example for the rest of our church body in terms of intergenerational ministry. It's not, I don't think, a task that's solely on the presbyter or whoever's been ordained or whoever's an accredited lay preacher, like our sisters in the car there traveling along the road. It's not about that. It's not about these titles that we hold. We all have a response to play. We all have a part to play in this intergenerational ministry. And just because it has the word ministry in there doesn't mean that it has to be, like I said, an ordained person, an accredited lay preacher. We think of the words of John Wesley, the world is my parish. You know, and we think about the empowering of John Wesley that he writes in his diaries as well. You know, he was probably more dependent on the people that he was training for lay ministry than he was on those who were in the ministry. So I think this intergenerational ministry, absolutely 100% important, but we've got a long way to go in terms of getting it reflected appropriately in terms of not only lay ministry, but across the board. So yeah, that's from me, Michael. If you want to have any closing thoughts or anyone has anything else to pop in.
Yep. Thanks, bro. That was such a great example. And yeah, the same person Sultana's talking about, like when we were at conference a few weeks ago, I rostered him to Hawera, which is on the other side of New Plymouth. And I organized all the hymns and everything because at that church they don't have an organist. So I organized all the music to be played. And what happened? Technology capitulated and it was a train wreck. And I was thinking to myself when I went to go see him after, even though it was someone else in the parish didn't follow the instructions, but I was going to say to him, you know, I'm sorry, John, this is on me. And when I got there, he said to me, oh, that was one of the best services that I've ever been part of. We had one person got up and sang at the back, and then, you know, we had a visitor here who was a young guy, and we went and passed the peace and did all these things. And that made me think that it's so crucial for us as to empower our lay preachers so that you are nothing more than genuinely yourselves in how you articulate your understanding and your love of God, how you worship with people. And one of the things that our lay preacher here in Taranaki will always say to us in his preparations, he said to me many times and Tanga as well, he's like, I'm not here to be a carbon copy of a minister. My role as a lay preacher is to come from a different angle and to bring my own experience. And I think that's a great freedom, I guess you could say, that lay preaching has, and when empowered and given the tools to be able to be the best that you can be, is that you can go and you can be that point of difference. You can challenge that perspective that might be typically heard from the pulpit, from your ministers. And I hope that you do. And the people, if we take the time, like what we've spoken about today, to be intentional, to seek authenticity, to look at why we do the things that we do. Those are the steps that we will take to allow for our people to come with us and to journey with us in this process and in this ongoing challenge that we are calling intergenerational ministry. So of course, it does matter for the sake of a contextual gospel relevant that responds to people and that initiates thought, as Tanga was saying earlier. Intergenerational ministry allows us to stay on that path. For the need for us to embody authentic expressions of hope in our communal gatherings as people. Intergenerational ministry allows us and gives us the space to be able to consider such things. And for us as lay leaders, as lay preachers, as people who serve and love God, we have, I believe, you have a responsibility to be intentionally different and challenging in such spaces where often we as presbyters and people in ordained ministry have gotten in such a rhythm of doing things the way we do them that we leave these gaps and these unanswered questions and people out of these conversations that actually, if Jesus was here, would probably be central to the stories and to the messages that we want our people to hear and to engage with. So where do we go from here? It's the question. And like Tanga and I said at the beginning, we're not coming with any concrete, this is a template for what intergenerational ministry should look like. Because we can't do that because we don't know your context. We don't know your people. We don't know where you are. But what we do want to offer for you as lay worship leaders and lay preachers and people who work in lay ministry is a guide, a kind of what we framed everything around today is around talanoa, around conversation, around space, and the opening of understanding. And so we want to, from our session today, offer a summary kind of resource that hopefully you'll be able to take back into your into your church context to be able to have these conversations with your parish councils, with your presbyters, with people, stakeholders in your faith communities, in order to kind of break down some of these intergenerational barriers and conversations. And alongside these things, Tanga and I are happy, I haven't asked Tanga about this, but Tanga and I are happy to, where if needed, to help to facilitate and to be present in those conversations where time will allow. But these are ongoing conversations, these are ongoing challenges, and these are things I think that can only be addressed with sincerity the more that we talanoa and kōrero and talk with our people in our church context, and also with people like yourselves here in this space. And so we're, well, I offer myself, and I'm sure Tanga does too, to continue to assist these conversations. And hopefully they'll be beneficial to you in your planning and in your preparation of your ministry and of your worship within your own faith communities and contexts. So I think that's where we're going to leave our conversation today, unless there are any other questions, comments, or thoughts or pushbacks. So Tanga, if you have anything you'd like to say as well to wrap. And I think Peter's already gone to do his Santa Claus duties for today. But if there are any other comments, questions, please feel free, and then we'll close our gathering this morning.
Yeah, sorry. Hey guys, thanks Michael. I'm just gonna jump in. Yeah, when's the next talanoa? Let me know. Offline, online, whatever. But yeah, I think conversations need to carry on and then steps in place. Thank you. Let's go.
We'll keep in touch with I think we'll give our Judy and Peter have our details as well. So if you do want to get in touch directly, please feel free to do so. And then if we want to have a part 2 of this in terms of our Lay Preachers Network, I think we can definitely tee that up somewhere down the line as well.
Yep, 100%. I think Michael's covered it all. We're happy to be available for any of those ongoing conversations that might pop up in the future. So yes, happy to offer. Or should I use Michael word? I'm happy to compromise my availability to have a part 2 of this. I think it's really, really important. If you've enjoyed this talanoa, that's great. if you've taken something out for yourself, that's even better. We just hope that whatever we've been able to have presented or proposed for all of you to think about, we hope that it's something meaningful, and hope it's really something that you can take away and begin to start making some waves. There's those who, the saying goes, there's those who observe still waters, and their job is to make sure that the waters remain still. But then there's those whose job it is to make waves. So if our little group here that's meeted this Saturday morning, can be wave makers, that'll be great. But yeah, definitely keen for a part 2. If you've enjoyed this style, that's great. Also, maybe Michael, we could just plug in here some of the resources that we've also made, especially around our Matariki session and stuff, so people can tune in, and you can watch that in your own time. And we will also continue to be doing those little projects together as our tag team going into the future. But yes, definitely, it's been a wonderful, and I'm extremely grateful for the privilege and honor to come and be a part of this talanoa and to share some thoughts, as well as be inspired to take my service prep to another level. So that's all from my end. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, guys. Are there any other comments or questions? And please, as we mentioned before, maybe some ideas. We're not the gatekeepers of intergenerational ministry by any means at all. We just happen to be facilitating a conversation today. If there was something you heard where you're like, I don't agree with that because I think da-da-da, that's great. Take those seeds of knowledge and wisdom and embed them into your own context, and see those things blossom and grow. And I'd love to hear those perspectives as well, if they come to mind later, or with Sultana as well. So I think with that being said, thank you.
I have a
Thank
question.
you, Judy. Yep.
Do you have a model or an order of service that has all incorporated bits and pieces of what we just discussed? For instance, I have been on this waka to try and include different people in the service and the hymns. But it needs to be embraced also by, I guess it's a start, by others in preparing the services.
Yeah.
For instance, we've got a young people's part, and I include the youth leader or the thing to say the prayer, to go and say the opening prayer, and say take the part and include a song for the young people, and have a not so young person do something else in the service. So it's just not me doing the whole service, although I do back up to provide things if they're not, oh, I can't do the prayer. Okay, I have a little prayer for you. You can adapt and you can as you wish. But just including different people in the service. So I was just wondering if you've got something for us to share with us in terms of enhancing the little things that we do.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. That's a great question. And like I was saying before, like we're not here to offer a concrete template. However, what we can do and we will do in sending out the resources following is break down each of the typical elements of a service and pose questions around things. Maybe have you considered XYZ in this part of your preparations? And I'm more than happy to do that, which will help you to do your part of the work, which will be to know and understand your context and the people, and engage in the kōrero and the talanoa like what we've had today. Because we could say, oh, this is an example of an intergenerational service, but then to someone on the other side of the country or across the mutu, that might not be able to be easily crafted or molded to their context. So that's why we've hesitated from saying, here's a template, go and use it, but more let's start by having a conversation, and then what we'll do is we'll send a resource that will accompany when you're looking at prayers, when you're looking at music, when you're looking at preparation. Here's some things to consider that can incorporate intergenerational understandings from our perspective, and that can be molded to your own context as well. Is that helpful to what you're asking?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
So like for me, music's my background, and I love to dissect the theology of all kinds of music. So I'd be happy to assist in those spaces. Tanga's a theological scholar, he's a theologian. So in terms of how to construct and look at text, we're more than happy to assist and to work with people in those spaces. And then of course, we both have backgrounds in youth ministry and working with young people. And so those are questions that we can bring in and help to consider for everyone as well.
Mm. And how what are some of the ways that you have found to be quite useful or helpful for the other generation to include the voice of the young people within the service? Because I did a little survey, just an informal one for the young people. What do you think of the service? Oh, boring. Oh, would like to have more young people sing, or, music and stuff. But it kind of like needed to be absorbed a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have to take a step back from asking them, as opposed to asking them, what did you like or not like about the service? The real question is more about, how do you understand God in this situation? Or what is your, we have to look at more, we have to take that step out before praxis and practicality, and actually attempt to open understanding, because then that will help us to address some of those issues around how we reflect that in our practice of worship. For example, some of our young people, when I was at Manirewa, because often we make a misperception that young people don't want to know about some of the things that we're talking about. But if you actually sit down and you talk to them about these things on their level and in their space, you actually find they're actually very interested. They're very interested. They just haven't been given the proper opportunity to voice or articulate their feelings in a way that is meaningful to them. So once we make those little steps and we take those things, and those things take time and it takes practice, those will help to equip us when it comes to worship. How do I consider what I've heard from young people and what they think about different things and what I'm interpreting in my theme for worship, etc., etc. So it's a long process of addressing issues and coming from angles in which we sometimes are beyond our own comfort zones. But the important thing is we make the effort and we try and we be intentional. And again, Tang and I are happy to support and to work with congregations and parishes and worship lay leaders and worship leaders who need assistance in helping with that process as well. So thank you so much for bringing that up, because it's a really good question and something that we'll definitely have in the post resources and notes that we'll send out from our session today.
Okay.
I think we're very lucky with the notes that you see, especially seeing we've got 6 churches, and the youth are now taking over from the older ones, which is so good. But the younger ones now, they work as groups, and they come together, and each group now have the opportunity to speak, and they love doing it. They love sharing their faith and their the challenge that is ahead of them, and it's so exciting to see. And the older people are encouraging them, and this makes all the difference. And they speak in their own language, and it's good. Yep. I just think that we are very fortunate where we are. They've still got a lot to learn. I'm not saying they know all the answers, but they're so excited to be able to do this, and to have the older people behind them. and encouraging them. And we now even having now young lay preachers wanting to come forward and learn to be a lay preacher. We've got 3 just starting.
Well, at that point, I'd like to bring the meeting to a close. Because I see people are leaving. But you brothers are fantastic. How lovely to have that opportunity to all that work and preparation you've done prior to talking, engaging in conversation with us. You've excelled yourself in making us think about this morning and thinking in our heads about the situations we're in and how to make it more accessible to the whole church community. So we can't thank you enough. So I'm going to give you a round of applause on behalf of everybody here. We can't thank you enough. And now I'd like to close the meeting in prayer. So I will pray and then we'll say the grace together, and you can all unmute and say it in your own language. All right, so there we go.
Linda, just before you say the grace and added thanks whakataitele lava mai manuia ia la sanga o lo whaasanga mai mo o lua maainga ngā mihi nui kia korua. I just wanted to make sure that people, if you've got some extra feedback, please send through to us or to Peter the feedback from today. And we've got one already about having a second part in March. We are going to do a climate justice one with Emily. That was Emily Golgan from Trinity College. And then we need to also, now it looks like we've got a second part coming up for this one. And will be great to have some more feedback on other, topics that people are interested in. And there was also feedback that people would love to still go on the face-to-face because they couldn't get on to the Zoom today. The instructions of how to get on was a bit challenging for some people. So that's also something we have to consider. But it's great that we managed to have an online session. And, it's good to mix things around. We've got the recording that will go on our website so that more people can have access to it. So that's another plus. So again, blessings, God's blessings, and peace to everyone. Thank you, Linda.
So let us pray. We give thanks for this time together, wherever we may live or worship. We know that we never stop learning, and today we thank our speakers for leading us to perceive fresh perspectives to further our work. Empower us with energy and ability to meet the needs of our diverse congregations. Thank you for inspiring us to preach your word. Be with us as we lead worship. We ask this prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. And the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship
of the Holy Spirit be with us all.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Mā lo, whawhatai.
Right. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday and we'll be in touch. Thank you for the opportunity once again.